Hey there, I'm Darin at GoEngineer. I decided to try something a little new this time. So I'm actually going to record something here that is 100% unscripted and live. And I wanted to go ahead and create one of my childhood favorites using the 3DEXPERIENCE platform Sculptor Role and the xShape app and sub-D modeling. Now I'm doing this without any notes whatsoever. In fact, the only Googling I've done up to this point is to find a few creative images. But when commonly, designing in sub-D modeling, there's an art to part step that is very prevalent in that process. So using a little bit of an inspirational image is something that's absolutely standard in this type of process. So I have not rehearsed this in any way, shape, or form, and we're just going to go through this live and see how it rolls and let this roll out organically. And since we're doing sub-D modeling, organically is the way to do it. So let's get started. I'm going to begin by logging into the 3DEXPERIENCE platform. I'm doing that through my launcher and my task tray. Now I do this every morning fresh at handshake with the licenses and everything, just grabs. And I'm also licensing my SOLIDWORKS desktop version as well, which is actually called SOLIDWORKS Connected. My licensing floats with me and follows me anywhere I'm logged into the internet. But for this process, SOLIDWORKS is nowhere to be needed. I'm actually going to use a purpose-built tool for the design that I want to create because it is such an organic shape. So I'm going to go into my Cloud Design tab that I've created and right into my xShape app. And for this process, there shouldn't be anything else needed. Now for an inspirational image, what I want to do is go ahead and use a couple of the things that I Googled. So I had to decide exactly what I wanted to use. Found some plushies out there, and that's kind of interesting, though I think my model is going to look a little better than that. But this is more of what I was kind of looking for. It's a little bit of a profile. Now, maybe we'll try something this in version 2 of this video, but what I'm really looking for is something that's very common. And this is probably one of the most common profiles that we have for my childhood favorite, ODIE. Now, I do have another piece of inspiration for this. Incredibly enough, I still have it today. And it's this part right here. This is actually a full ceramic ODIE that I made in high school. So this would be circa 1989. The tongue has broken off a few times, the tail, the ears. They have a lot of Gorilla Glue on those. But again, it's a childhood favorite, and it dates back, in this case, 35 years. So it's pretty incredible, and I want to recreate this in obviously incredibly new technology related to what was available back when I was making this with actual clay. So even back in high school, the computers we had weren't very sophisticated, and we were just doing basic programming language back then. All right, now then, let's go ahead and actually utilize this image. So the process that we actually start with here is that I'm going to just begin with a brand new component. Now I'm logged into my different creative spaces, and for this one here, I'm just going to go ahead and put this in my demo space. So we'll just go ahead and start a brand new physical product. Maximizing the screen is a great way to utilize all of your workspace. So to begin, I want to go ahead and bring in this image. So down in my toolbars here, we've got a lot of different toolbars, and the subdivision toolbars where I'm going to go ahead and create the different organic bodies that we're going to use here. But when you look through what's available, some of these toolbars have some other things here. Now I want to be very clear here. I have a license that includes other roles on the 3DEXPERIENCE platform. Things like xShape, goes with xDesign, with xMold, and some of the other X apps. And that affords me a few additional buttons here that you might not have if you just have the Sculptor Role. So full disclosure there, because I have extra functionality, it all blends together here in a much more rich experience. Now then, I'm going to go to my Tools tab here, and what I want to do is go ahead and bring in an image. So just using the hieroglyphics here, even if you're new to the process, that one looks pretty good here. So that one says Insert Picture. All right, let's go with it. This I have done before. Now, we're going to choose our picture, so I've got to go ahead and navigate to my desktop here. And on my desktop, I'm actually going to go to my C drive here. I've got a workspace that I use for videos, so we're just going to go to my Sculpting My Childhood Favorite, and we're going to grab the profile that works best for this particular application. And this is one of the more common versions of ODIE once again. Now, it wants me to put it on a placement plane, so of course I can just walk through the process. And at this point, it's going to put it in at full scale. And if it's a high resolution image, that could be quite large. So we've got a couple of different options here when it comes to scale. We can manually scale this if we want to, and that really is just nothing more than grabbing these points here, and it's going to keep the orientation and the scale and the aspect ratio intact. But we could also go ahead and do a couple of other things like on-screen points. Now, if I'm using on-screen points, what it's essentially going to do is give me the ability to give it a distance. So with these two on-screen points, if I knew that his, height or his nose, let's just say his nose in this particular one, his nose to the back of his head was going to be a particular distance, and we're just going to call that 1 inch for the size of scale. We'll come down here and we'll just simply type 1 inch, and that's going to go ahead and give us 25.4 millimeters, and you see how small that actually gets. So we're going to take that, and we're actually going to go ahead and make that 6 inches, and when we go ahead and do things like send this to the 3D printer or other operations, well, we can really just worry about the physical scale at that particular point. So at this point, though, that's a great way to do this. If you have a known image, which has a scale built into it, it's a great way to scale that 1-to-1 perfectly. So take photos of your images with a scale in it, or export those maybe from Adobe Illustrator is usually where a lot of sources like this happen. Now, I skipped one little piece of this. I'm actually going to go back and do this as well, but this is part of the intuitive piece that xShape will give you. I'm a SolidWorks user by nature, and I've been using it for 2.5 decades. So I'm very, very accustomed to it. And I find the knowledge in SolidWorks difficult for me to do other things in some cases. But you'll find that the X apps on the 3DEXPERIENCE platform are actually quite natural. If I want to go ahead and edit this, I can just double click it on screen and it just becomes an editable feature. In fact, I didn't even have to right click and say edit feature for something like that. Now, the step I missed for myself is I wanted to actually make that somewhat transparent. When I'm modeling, I want to use it for inspiration, but I want to be able to see everything that I'm working on. So there we go. All right, now then, the first step in this process is to go ahead and create a subdeep body. Now down here, what we're going to do is just use my subdivision tools, and it's broken out into 2 different areas. We have some different surface items, and then we have a bunch of subdeep primitives here. Now I'm going to start out on this one here with the, we'll go with the globe. Let me debate on that, actually. I'm going to start with Odie's eyes. Now, I've drawn Odie hundreds and hundreds of times in my lifetime, and I'm going to sort of model this in the order in which I model or draw it by hand. So here I want to go ahead and start with, let's just start with the globe. Again, this is unscripted. Let's see what we can do with this. So as we go ahead and move this around, I'm going to use the image here for inspiration when it comes to position and scale. But of course, we're looking at a profile, and I don't have a 90 degrees opposed left side view or front view as it would be for this in order to go ahead and give it the width scale. So we're going to have to use this image as inspiration, but I'm going to have to use my imagination when it comes to the 3D version of this. The image is sitting in the middle though, so that's going to be our symmetry plane, and everything will take place around that. Let me get a little drink here. Maybe I'll cut the drinks out, maybe I won't, but I need a little drink. Okay, we're going to simply click on the screen to go ahead and place this, and as a result of that, what we get are scale options. Now I can scale this in different directions. This being a globe, it's actually going to scale as a spherical piece here. But the other modification I can do once I get it to being in the rough scale area here is I can add additional I can go ahead and add additional segments to this if I want to, but in a lot of cases, we're thinking a little bit more of a less is more type of way to model these things initially. So let me just go ahead and say okay to that. If I need to scale it at this point, I do have that option additionally. All right, that looks pretty good right now. Now, I also want to be able to see the image through my solid right now. So I've also got the option to come up here and do a couple of different things. There are different views of this part. We can go ahead and show it as shaded or wireframe, but what I can also do is just do a transparent on that as well. So now I've got a little bit of transparency on both of those working, but I'm currently editing my, my globe here. So that's gonna go ahead and give me the opportunity to see both what's underneath and what I'm working on. Now, depending on what I have selected determines what I can do, and my robot gets everything done from there. Here, everything is selected, so I can reposition this a little bit, but I can also use the little dots at the end of here to go ahead and scale these in different directions. Now, by selecting one of the points at the end of my robot here, it's going to scale in that direction. If I happen to hold down the Alt key as I do that, it actually scales uniform in all directions, and those are just a couple little tricks for you. So I'm going to get that size looking pretty good, but then I'm going to go ahead and just scale the side here. All that looks pretty good there as well, and I have rotational handles. So maybe we'll go ahead and put those rotational handles in place. I think that looks pretty good, and I'm kind of surprised how nicely that looks myself because, again, being unscripted, this is just one of those things where I'm just not quite sure how this is going to go, but I have confidence because I just love the way these tools function. Now, if I go ahead and rotate this to the side, I'm going to have a guess here that Odie's eyes are going to be, for the most part, round, but I'm going to add just a little bit of oval to those. So we have another point here that's in our third direction. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to use the axis just to go ahead and move that eye right of center. I can see that my plane is right there. So we can do a couple of different things with this when it comes to scaling and copying these. But for now, what I want to do is just go ahead and create that piece. We'll take a look at the side view here. That's really a very big zoomed out side view. So let's go ahead and exit and maybe zoom in on that. All right. Let's rebuild and zoom in. Okay, cool. So that looks pretty good so far. That's got us an eye in the right position. So, okay, I guess we'll start with that. Now, the next thing that I usually do is I usually draw the front of his mouth here. And I draw this area here, and then I kind of draw down in this front area. And it kind of works down into his legs as well. But I'm going to have to do this a little differently because the body is going to be all together, and then I'm going to add the limbs as a separate step. So for starters here, I want to get a shape that's going to be very similar to, again, the shape that I need to use as a final piece. So we're going to go ahead and start another one of these. And the first one worked out pretty good here, but I want to go with a quad ball this time. The globe was good, but the quad ball gives me a little bit more when it comes to the different segments that we have in this part here. So again, I'm going to go ahead and kind of throw that roughly where I need that to be, which is going to be right over top of him. And as we go ahead and work on this, we're going to go ahead and want to have that a little bit transparent as well. So we'll get this in rough position, rough scale. I think we had it looking pretty good to start, and then we'll just go ahead and say OK to that. Okay, that's pretty good. Our transparency kicks in as we're editing this. So that all looks pretty good as well. Now, I want to go ahead and take this and kind of shape it based on the image that we have here. And what that means is we don't need to see absolutely everything that's here. In fact, we don't need to see even the eye that we have here right now. The eye is the knit surface part right here. We can go ahead and just hit hide on that, and that'll go away for right now. But what I want to do is select only the things that I intend to edit. So now with a little window selection, I'm going to go ahead and take just the points that we have up here on the top. And using our robot, again, we're going to go ahead and move those around a little bit. Now over here on this side of his mouth, I can see his mouth is kind of coming in a little bit. We'll just move that in there as well. I don't know what's really happening behind his eyes here, so I'm going to kind of window select around this area as well and maybe bring that stuff in. Now what's happening is it is keeping 100% of the C2 tangency as we do this, unless I add a crease. And what a crease will allow you to do is give it a sharp or a sharp but still class A type of an edge to it. Now I'm trying to match this image again, but I'm not quite sure what that's going to do for the overall look of ODIE here. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe this is a little bit much on the top here. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a top view to this. And then we're going to go ahead and maybe, change that up just a little bit. So you kind of see where we're at right there. Now I want everything that I do to actually happen symmetrically here. So what I'm going to do is turn on symmetry at this point. Now symmetry requires us to grab a symmetry plane. So we're just going to use the plane that's right in the center. And it puts a little green line on there to indicate that symmetry is currently active. Now as I'm working on that, what I really have to do is just focus on selecting some of these items on one side here. And as I select those, everything is going to happen simultaneously on both sides. So that makes life a little easier there as well. Now I want to refine this a little bit. I'm going to take just a couple of points here, and we're just going to use those and kind of move them in a little bit. And I'm using a behavior here, which is actually having these points and the robot itself show up perpendicular, completely normal to the surface that that point sits on. If you click the actual robot itself, it's going to turn the robot into the active element. And by right-clicking, I can get into the settings of the robot. So that's based on my selection right now. If I want it to stay relative to the screen orientation, what we have up here, or if I want it to stay in an XYZ orientation, I can lock those in as well. But for now, we're going to go ahead and keep that with the selection. Now, by picking the robot again, you see the robot becomes active. And now if I go ahead and grab a point and start moving points around, then those points are now going to be the things that actually start moving. So when the robot is selected, you can edit its position, you can edit its orientation as it moves, but when you go ahead and select it and re-engage, it's now going to influence whatever is selected on screen. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to leave that for what we've got right now, although that does look a little bit wide to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and take kind of the rest of what we have here with ODIE and maybe just bring that in. Now, window selection has been working well to this point. I'm just going to kind of stick with that for now, I guess. As we get going with this, though, what we're going to have is a situation where I'm going to have to do some more lasso selection, so that might be a little better. Now, I'm not sure if I actually got what I wanted to move down here, so I'm going to hit Control Z. It really does look like actually everything kind of came in and looked a little bit more narrow. But what I'm going to do here is actually select everything. And by selecting everything, that's going to give me that opportunity to kind of drag all of those in and maybe scale that stuff in just a little bit as well. So we'll go ahead and grab the outside, and there's a lot of fine tuning that we end up doing with this. It's just really one of the things that I've probably noticed most off is how much we actually do of just grabbing and manipulating points here. But it's really like sculpting, and literally what we're doing here is just organically sculpting these shapes. Okay, I think we're done with that particular part of this. Now, I've got a couple of options that I can do here. I can either start additional sub-D bodies, create what I think is the rest of him, or I can go ahead and start making these all as one single sub-D body. So with this one here, I think I might just go ahead and start adding additional clay to this and just building off of that. So let me take a little drink. We'll continue on with that. Since I exited the actual sub-D body, it creates the sub-D edit, as well as knitting the surface into something more smooth and organic as a result of the calculations. But when I'm editing it, it's in a different mode here. It's in the subdivisional surface, and that gives me a little bit more of a raw and light version of this. Exiting it, you'll actually see it refine a little bit as you do that. Now, what I want to do over here is actually go ahead and add some clay to this side. With that, let's take the picture for a moment here, and let's just hide that picture and get that out of the way for just a second. Now, where I want to do that, I'll bring the picture back just in case we kind of lost track of where we were with that, but we're kind of working right back in here where his mouth is, so kind of in this subdivisional area. So by hiding this little picture here, what that gives me an opportunity to do is to just kind of work on these areas. And we're going to throw some clay at this. So by picking these 4 faces, and frankly by picking 2 of them with symmetry turned on is what really is going to make this happen, we can do a feature called an extrude. Now an extrude in sub-D modeling is really like throwing clay at that. You see it just bumped those faces out and gave us some additional work material to actually deal with. So with that in place, and I really didn't need to hide this, I just wanted to emphasize that for y'all, is I want to go ahead now and start grabbing some additional things. Now, what I grab really determines how this is going to move. And so, to this point, I've been using vertices, points, the nodes that we have here. By grabbing faces, what you're going to do is grab a face as is, and as that face moves, the things adjacent to it are going to go ahead and maintain their organic tangency. So as we move this and try and use our model underneath and our image underneath to go ahead and work this, what this enables me to do is grab points, grab edges, grab features, and just drag those things around in order to go ahead and map these shapes. Now, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here when we put eyes on that, but I think probably ODIE is going to have a little bit of material in his jawline there. Maybe I'll go ahead and take a couple of these faces using just a shift select, and we'll just bump those out a little bit more. I can come back and do a little bit more of that if I need to. But I really also have the ability to go ahead and add this big bump on the back. So let's just do that. We're going to grab a couple more faces and we'll do another extrude. And that's going to go ahead and add another additional bit of material here. Now by picking these faces, the robot still works magically in those same ways when it comes to scaling and manipulating. If I start to go ahead and take this face and move it, what you'll see is that that face is going to physically move. But if I go ahead and start scaling that face, you'll see everything around that face is also going to stay completely adjacent to that. We start to drag it out. Looks like it bumps nicely, and I'm actually quite impressed with my own skills with this. I have to be honest with you. This is going well, but I've used the tool enough that I'm kind of, thinking ahead of where I want to go with this. But frankly, I'm pleasantly surprised as a few of these things are coming together. Now, I feel like ODIE's going to have a bit more of a round head. That's one of those things where I'm going to have to use the creative freedom with this one because I'm really not sure what this is going to end up looking like. At this point, though, what I do know is I want to move this in a little bit of a different direction. It's kind of going not in the direction I want it to. So if I'm looking at a top view of this, what I really want to do is move this about straight out. By picking the robot again, I can go ahead and activate it, and right-clicking gives me some options to give it some on-screen control I didn't have before. Now I'm going to take it and click it again, which is going to go ahead and reactivate now it being a control point. And again, whatever I have selected is going to go ahead and move in the direction that I want to. So in this case, if I want to go ahead and move a little bit more of his head side here, we'll grab just those faces and start dragging those out. And that looks pretty good right now. Again, I don't know what he's going to look like, but this is kind of exciting the way this is starting to pan out. Okay, so I know he's got a neck down here. This is going to be interesting as well. And right here, I need a little bit more workspace to actually work on. So for a moment, I want to do a couple of other things. I'm going to pick the face to kind of identify where we're at. But if I could, I'm going to go ahead and hide our image. So here's the faces in question. What I need is a little bit more area to work here. And to do that, I actually want to select these faces. We're going to go ahead and create a feature here that we call a subdivide. Now it takes these faces and actually creates additional faces in the middle and then gives adjacent faces that allow us to now manipulate the face in the middle, but leave all of the faces that are unselected here in their current position. So as I described that, you'll see that we have now additional edges, and then we have these adjacent faces that now serve as a margin between the edges we had before and the faces that we've now created. So again, I've done some things like this before, but I wasn't quite sure how I was going to tackle this part of him. So now by bringing the image back, let's see what we've got here. Okay, kind of interesting. I'm going to leave this area here actually untouched, and I'm going to take our area right here and we're going to subdivide this one more time. Not sure this is going to work, but undo might be my best friend here. That's actually not so bad. Let's go ahead and take that. So using just these couple of faces now, I'm going to use my symmetry here so I don't have to select as much, but we're going to take that face and we're going to drag that drastically down. And I'm also going to scale that drastically out. And what that's going to give me, again, is a little bit more material to work with what I have here. Now, I've got a debate on this one here. What should I do? Should I just drag that down really big? That kind of elongates that area. I guess that's not quite what I'm looking for. So maybe I'll just drag that back up. But maybe at this point, once I get something that's a little bit more appropriate scale-wise, maybe move that into position. That's pretty good. We're going to need to accommodate for the front of his neck here as well. So maybe grabbing this edge and pulling that forward is not so bad. Yeah, that's pretty good so far. Now I can just go ahead and start grabbing these faces down here and slapping clay on those. What that's effectively going to do is give us some subdivides, and it's also going to go ahead, oops, I didn't want to do that one. Let's do an undo. Again, this is a completely live challenge. So as we're creating these, we can do loops and subdivides as necessary. Now, I think I'm going to have enough on this one, probably on our next one. I'm just going to leave it at that, and that's going to give me some ability to work in these extra areas in the middle. And now I can fan this bottom out for his body. Okay, the position that I just grabbed that was one of those things where maybe I wasn't in an orientation that was convenient for a box select. Use your imagination on this one. I can switch from box select to lasso select actually by going down to the tools. The tools themselves, and it's down there, but you know what? You have to go ahead and actually select it. In fact, I don't even know what button it is. There it is. It's on the tools toolbar. Again, we're doing this live. You can switch to lasso, but frankly, there's a cool little trick to this. If you're in a box select and you just simply go back to the original point while you're dragging, it actually switches to a lasso. And that will enable you to do a few different things. So if I want to go ahead and get an odd orientation of faces or edges or points, what I can do is kind of box select and then back out of that. And then we can go directly into a lasso select to grab just those, right? So again, box select, kind of go back to it and punt, and then come up here and grab just the points we wanted. So now I've got this really odd selection here, and I'm getting some front, neck, and some stuff in the back kind of going separately. Right? Pretty interesting. Okay, so I'm going to grab them like that because I wasn't sure what I was going to do there, but that actually looks kind of cool. Maybe if I go ahead and grab these faces here and start doing a couple of extrudes, that might be awesome as well. See, now when I pick the faces and hit extrude, or I use the extrude tool, there's a slightly different bit of workflow that this actually takes. You get a preview when you do it this way. I'm not exactly happy with what I'm seeing there, but I'm going to say okay to that to just kind of see what it gives us. Yeah, I don't like the little humpback it gave him up here, but that might actually be convenient down here now that I'm looking at that. Let's take all those faces. I'm going to go back to a lasso select here, and we're going to grab all those. Okay, so I got a situation here where I've actually grabbed some points on the front I didn't want. So let's just click, and I'm going to click in the backspace here so we can just deselect all of that. Let's try that one more time. All right, let's be a little bit more careful of how I do this. All right, that looks pretty good. We're going to move this using some planar selection here. This allows me to go kind of left, right, and top and bottom all at the same time. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's good. I'm going to grab all these points on the top then, and then just grab those and bring them down. Wow, this is really, really wild how this pans out. I wasn't expecting this, but this is really, really very fun. I think grabbing his lip up here on the front is going to be pretty easy as well, because we can just accomplish that with a little extrude. Maybe. Well, I got to take a little bit of a sharp corner here, right? So let's use this as an opportunity to show you the crease. I'm using symmetry still, so I want to take this edge, and instead of it necessarily being class A, I might keep it class A. but it's going to have a round to it. So I'm going to actually pick on the toolbar in this case because this will give me an interface. So the interface that I'm starting with gives me this really sharp crease. And you can see how we can blunt that a little bit more. We can sharpen it. Without this button selected though, it is literally a sharp crease. It's like folding over a piece of paper. Now with it, we can also hit this button, which will round it. So it will keep it very, very pronounced, but it will give us the ability to still have a Class A blend. For what I'm doing right now though, let's just go ahead and make that a sharp crease. This is interesting how this is going to play out. All right, we can see the image from behind. So let's grab our faces up front, maybe move those up. Oh my gosh, I really cannot believe how cool that just worked. Wow. And then, you know, from the side here, we got to take these faces here and maybe be a little bit more appropriate when it comes to his throat area. You take that edge in there. This is actually kind of exciting. I'm glad I'm doing this live because I'm getting the real excitement that one would get as they're creating something like this. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, what I really have to do is I have to make sure that my yellow areas are back here. So I'm actually going to grab these using the Shift key, and we're going to use that to just manipulate these edges because I want those edges to actually be more or less back where we see the yellow on ODIE here. So I'm going to grab some points and see how that plays out. And yeah, that's not so bad, right? That's not so bad. Take this face here and maybe bring that up and in. Okay, we're just going to kind of leave it right there. A little bit obsessive compulsive with this. Okay, let's leave it right about there. Now, another thing I was going to do is I did this crease down here. So let's do a couple of creases right up the side of his mouth as well. And what these creases are going to do for us is, again, give us the ability in this case, and let's turn transparency off. I really want you to see how this works, is we're going to take just the center of his mouth and we're going to move that inward. Oh, yeah. Heck yeah. Okay. That looks awesome. Let's do that down here too. I'm going to take just this area here. We're going to move that inward. Oh, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. Let's kind of leave that as is. Wow. Well, I didn't think that was going to work out that way, but this is pretty cool so far. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and make the rest of his body here, and then might be time to take a break. Here we've got a little lump on his back. I'm going to use an extrude on that one. I think that's going to probably work out pretty nice. Yeah, that's not so bad. And then we'll just take these faces right here and let's just pull those guys all the way out. See what we can do with those. Kind of feeling like Bob Ross at this point, I got to be honest with you. Got happy little shapes. This is really interesting how this is working out, but it really is just more about working the image. I have a goal right here behind me. It's pretty obvious. So if I have a goal and I have something, I just have to execute the plan, right? So what we've got going here really is no more than just kind of taking what I see and using that inspiration and just kind of making it happen. All right, I think I'm going to try and extrude inside here and see if I can get that little back lump out of there too. Not sure I like that. Control Z. Control Z is my friend. What I'm going to do instead is let's go ahead and take these faces and subdivide them. Okay? We'll subdivide these a little bit. That's going to give me a little bit more workspace in there. And what that should do is give me the opportunity to kind of grab and pull those faces out a little bit. There's one. I don't need to grab them both because I have symmetry. And then let's go ahead and kind of scale those faces out a little bit. Interesting. Okay. This one I'm not sure that's going to pan out. You know, just when I wasn't sure. All right, I need to back out, take a little side view here, see what I got going. Yeah, not sure about that. Let's roll those kind of over a little bit. Maybe we'll grab this edge and pull that up and out. Yeah, interesting. So this is where a lot of the trial and error is going to come in with something like this. Because I've got a pretty good looking shape, but the more I manipulate one spot, the more another spot is going to need a little bit of touch up. So that's, you know, that's like what clay is, right? We're not mincing words when it comes to how this actually functions in that respect. So it's really pretty cool when it comes to that. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and stick it with that right now. Very, very, very cool. All right, for right now, I'm going to go ahead and hit the pause button here. We're going to exit this feature and kind of see what we've got. And maybe I'll go ahead and turn on the other knit surface here and see what the eyeball looks like sitting there. All right, that's a pretty good start. We'll be right back and we'll continue from there.